Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole by Holly Madison. Due to the contents in the book, there is a viewer discretion. Also, I may have to change the names of certain things in order to abide by the guidelines and to censor myself. But let's get back into it. As it happens with transfers, many of my credits from Portland State didn't apply towards my program at Loyola Marymount. In order to graduate on time, I'd have to load up on credits, which included long theater hours that would require working backstage on different productions during the evenings, when I typically waitressed. I knew that with a packed school schedule and a full-time job, I wouldn't have any time to study. And if I couldn't study, I wouldn't be able to meet the minimum grade requirements for my scholarships. So, after a year at LMU, I decided to take a break from school to focus on pursuing my career. I would never be as young or as eager as I was in that moment, and I figured that I might as well take the plunge. School would always be there, so if it didn't work out for me, I could easily go back and finish my degree. It's not unusual to graduate from college at 30, but it's a lot less likely to break into acting at that age. In my heart, I thought it was the best decision for me at the time. With school on hold, I picked up some more shifts at Hooters and eventually started working part-time as a Hawaiian tropic model. The gig basically required me to show up at events in company apparel or appear in movie bit roles in swimwear and a Miss Hawaiian Tropic pageant sash. I thought it would be a great way to make extra money and also to meet people. In Hollywood, you never knew where opportunities would arise. I would end up being right, of course. The gig would lead to something, though maybe not what I had expected. Not long after, at a Hawaiian Tropic bikini contest in Beverly Hills, one of the event organizers pointed out an older man. "You see that guy over there?" he asked. "That's Hugh Hefner's personal physician." Naturally, it was exciting that someone associated with Playboy was at the event, but I didn't give it too much consideration until an hour later when the man approached me. "Would you be interested in attending a party at the Playboy mansion?" he asked, barely taking the time to meet my eyes. My mouth fell to the floor. He posed the remark as a question, but it was clear he already knew there was only one answer. He'd apparently been at the party offering invitations to the girls he deemed Playboy party worthy. It wasn't abnormal for a representative from the magazine or one of Hef's friends to invite attractive women to the parties. Many of my coworkers had become regulars at the mansion. I guess I just wasn't expecting an invitation of my own, and especially not from his doctor of all people. Was he really asking me if I want to go to the Playboy mansion? I thought. For a starstruck girl from Oregon, this felt like the chance of a lifetime. "Are you kidding?" I squealed. "Of course!" In Los Angeles in 2000, there was only one invitation that mattered: a Playboy party. Nowadays, invitations to the Playboy mansion are sold to the highest bidders and to any media outlet offering any morsel of publicity. It's no longer considered exclusive or coveted. But back then, it was the place to be. Hef threw only a handful of parties each year with a maximum capacity of about 800, and the guest list was strictly invitation only. When I received my glossy black invitation in the mail a few days later, I could feel my heart swell with excitement. Hef's Midsummer Night's Dream Party, it read. Why is that the one that I always would want to be invited to, though? Like, out of all of them, like, that seemed like the fun one to me, and I don't know if it's because of the title being Midsummer Night's Dream. I don't know, but teenage me was like, hell yeah, I'm gonna be there one day. On the front was a beautiful pinup illustration by famed artist Olivia de Berardinis. I think that's how you say it. I just fucked that one up. Berardinis. I still feel like I'm fucking it up. And inside was a small piece of paper with directions. It was like Cinderella finally scoring an invitation to the ball. Except, instead of arriving by horse-drawn carriage, we would board a shuttle at the UCLA parking garage. The dress code was strict. Sleepwear required. My coworker Heather had also landed an invitation. A huge coup for me, considering invitees weren't allowed a +1. So we immediately started obsessing over what we would wear. Despite having very little flexible income, I decided I needed a new lingerie set from Fredericks of Hollywood, a black satin corset with matching garter belts, thigh-high stockings, and a short yet conservative silk robe to wear on top of the ensemble. Bikinis and Hooters shorts aside, it would be a little while before I would be comfortable parading around in lingerie or less, the staple look at a Playboy party. One by one, guests stepped off the shuttle. Every inch of the estate seemed to sparkle. Bright white twinkle lights lit the walkway towards the decadent soiree. Gorgeous colored spotlights draped the cascading waterfalls framing the pool. Both Heather and I were so overwhelmed we barely spoke a word to each other as we took in the magnificent grounds. Before we entered the party, a staffer asked to take our photograph. We didn't even question why, as one by one each woman stood for a Polaroid. When we finally made our way around to the backyard, we spotted the most lavish buffet of food I had ever seen. For two broke waitresses who existed mainly on top ramen and chicken wings, it was a feast fit for royalty. Seafood bars, carving stations, sushi buffets, dessert carts, and gorgeous-looking drinks flowing from the flagstone bar next to the pool. Suddenly, Heather jerked my arm and pointed across the lawn. "Oh my God, there's Cameron Diaz," she said, pointing to the tall, beautiful blonde sitting at a table nearby, and next to her was Jim Carrey. Across the pool, Heather spotted Leonardo DiCaprio. It was a virtual who's who of Hollywood. "Holly, Heather!" We heard our names through the crowd. Who could we possibly know here? It was a welcome relief to see our friend Kira, another Hooters server, waving to us from across the party. She navigated her way through the sea of people with the expertise of someone accustomed to these types of events. Working together, I knew that Kira had seen her fair share of Playboy parties. "You guys want a tour?" She posed the question as if we had just happened into her very own living room, and we immediately took her up on the offer. She walked us through the infamous candlelit grotto, which was still empty at this early hour, through the zoo, where we fed grapes to the tiny monkeys, and inside the 70s-themed game house before making our way into the main event. Gorgeous, colorful fabrics clung to every corner of the grand tent rooftop, while faux grass lined the bottom, creating the illusion of some fantastical forest, although I'm quite certain that many of the people in attendance didn't make a habit of reading Shakespeare, and in some cases, quite possibly, had never even heard of the play the party was named for. Everything looked so sensuous and inviting. It wasn't until we were tucked away in a corner of the tent that I finally spotted our infamous host looking quite gloomy, especially for a man flanked by two of the most breathtaking beauties I had ever seen. The Bentley twins were tall, tan, and reed thin, with slow, languorous walks. They conducted themselves like royalty, as if they were on the arm of a king or a president, but they were dressed like sex kittens in custom-tailored Baraki costumes, shimmering with beads, sequins, and Swarovski crystals on French lace skirts and tops. Their outfits were unlike anything any other partygoer was wearing. They were sexy but oh so elegant, with perfectly painted faces and blonde cascading curls decorated with glittery butterflies. They were picture perfect and, needless to say, made a lasting impression. "Hef never stays for that long," Kira said when she saw me looking over at Hef and his fabulous girlfriends. I watched as Hef sat in a crowded corner of the tent, shaking hands with one partygoer after another. My first thought was that he appeared really out of it. Was he senile? I thought. More likely, he was just bored. After 50 years of glad handing, I'd imagine you'd get sick of it too. I knew I didn't have long before he made his escape, so Heather and I headed towards his table to introduce ourselves. Maybe Mr. Playboy would see me, think I was pretty, and suggest I audition for a pictorial. It was a long shot, but I figured it couldn't hurt. Stranger things could happen. "Hi, I'm Holly," I said, sticking out my hands to meet his. "What's that?" he asked, clearly having trouble hearing over the crowd. "I'm Holly," I repeated a little louder. "Oh, hi. Nice to meet you, darling," Hef said before turning his attention to the next person. There were no fireworks, no Rhapsody in Blue, and there certainly wasn't any audition. Oh well, I thought. I gave it a shot. Chapter 2. All right, let's read this part from Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. In another moment, down went Alice after it, never once considering how in the world she was going to get out again. A year after my first Playboy Mansion invite, I had become something of a fixture at the infamous Sunday Fun in the Sun pool parties. After that fateful Midsummer Night's Dream party, Heather and I started getting invited back to the mansion regularly. What wasn't to love? Bikinis, drinks, food, music, and friends. And without fail, the sun was always shining on Hef's little corner of heaven. He wouldn't have had it any other way. Without the massive tents and fake grass that the staff sprawled out for the Midsummer Night's Dream soirees, you could really appreciate the true beauty of the property. Lush landscaping, rolling green hills, and exotic birds that roamed freely throughout the grounds. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was truly an oasis in the middle of Los Angeles, and a life so unlike my own that I almost envied the women that were able to call this magical place home. So you can put faces to names. I am going to post them as I can. These are the infamous Bentley twins. Of those women, the glamorous Bentley twins had already exited the mansion by this time, leaving an opening for a new crop of blondes to emerge, most of whom would also wound up being published in the magazine as playmates in rapid succession. In the Playboy culture, it's considered an honor to be chosen as the magazine's Playmate of the Month. The large pictorial includes a poster folded in the center of the issue, hence the name Centerfold. An even bigger honor was to be chosen as the magazine's Playmate of the Year. Every June, a winning Playmate is selected from the previous year's 12 candidates and is awarded $100,000, a new car, a new pictorial, and a cover. Most girls who rotated through the Playboy revolving door prayed that they might eventually be chosen as a Playmate so that their names would be in contention when it came close to choose the Playmate of the Year. Hef's new girlfriends weren't all necessarily Playmates, but they definitely all aspired to be. In fact, to an outsider, it could easily be misconstrued that the only way a blonde was eligible to be featured in the magazine was to date its editor-in-chief. Month after month, they appeared. Brandy Roderick, Buffy Taylor, Katie Lohman, Kimberly Stanfield, Tina Jordan, and 3 of Hef's other girlfriends were in the process of shooting soon-to-be published Playmate pictorials as well. Hundreds of women were invited to each mansion party, so of course not all of them could be Playmates. Some of the Playmate hopefuls unable to land on one of those 12 coveted spots modeled for less prestigious minor pictorials in Playboy or for pictorials on Playboy.com. The guest list for the Sunday pool parties was much more selective, so I have to admit I was flattered to have been included. Only 20 or so girls were invited to these more intimate events, splashing the day away. Yet it was rare to see any of Hef's then 7 girlfriends at the pool party for any length of time. I remember it striking me as odd that they chose to hole away in their mansion bedrooms, but I didn't give it much thought beyond that. I would later realize that they considered it dues they no longer needed to pay. As for Hef, he would be tucked away in a corner of the pool and play backgammon with 2 friends, Usually the only other males allowed to be in attendance. Occasionally they would stride over and join the girls in a drink or a game, but they mostly kept to themselves and always focused their attention on Hef. After all, they wanted a repeat invite, and Hef, without actually saying a word, made it clear that the girls were solely for his amusement. The staffers, who strictly refused all tips, were readily available to wait on us hand and foot. The mansion gym was available to any of the girls who wanted to work out during the party, perhaps a red flag to the expectations placed on the women of Playboy. And a masseuse was on call in the bathhouse for guests looking to further unwind. One afternoon, I was freshening up in the bathhouse and talking with a girlfriend when a buxom woman named Nicole bounced in and introduced herself. She was very sweet, but I could barely stop gaping long enough to get a word out. This woman had the largest breasts I'd ever seen. So large that it looked like the implants were struggling to escape from under her skin. The masseuse had to go rustle up an extra stack of towels just so Nicole could lie on her stomach for the treatment. Years later, I was flipping through an issue of Playboy and recognized the busty blonde from the bathhouse. Only this time her name was Coco. And she was married to the rapper Ice-T. I did my pause after saying her name Coco because I was having everybody realize which Coco it was. It's been her booty that has earned her the most attention, but strangely enough, I didn't notice her butt as unusually large back then. Probably because I couldn't take my eyes off of those boobs. Speaking of Coco, I just want to have a little sidebar. Do y'all think that she has had ass implants? Or do you think that she just works out to make her butt look like that? Because to me, I think that she's had some enhancements, even though she claims that she never has. But I just want to know what y'all think. Let's get back to the book, though. When the light would eventually dip below the hills in yet another picture-perfect sunset, the service staff would busy themselves with preparations for the evening's dinner and movie screening. The pool party guests would excuse themselves to freshen up as the festivities moved inside. Eventually, some of the girlfriends would trickle down from upstairs and idly take their obligatory seat next to Hef at the dining table for the pre-movie buffet. I could never understand their lack of enthusiasm. They seemed to have it all. Initially, I assumed they were spoiled, jaded, or just not a good fit in Hef's world. Maybe they hated the social scene or hated watching old movies every week. Since those were things I happened to love, I couldn't understand it. Because I was an LA transplant, the concept of being fake was still a bit lost on me. Don't get me wrong, I was familiar with fake tans, fake nails, and of course fake boobs, having already undergone my breast enhancement surgery, but I didn't have any idea how insincere and calculated people could be. It never dawned on me that the girls I was about to be spending a lot of time with had ulterior motives beyond simply being friendly, and that all of their encouragement was just for show. As I'd come to learn, they saw me as a useful pawn in their twisted game of Playboy chess. In those early days, Vicky and Lisa, two of Hef's living girlfriends, were incredibly welcoming. The other girlfriends weren't particularly mean, but they didn't exactly roll out the red carpet either. I knew that the role of girlfriend was coveted by many and fleeting for some, so I expected the women to be defensive, protective, and quite frankly, bitchy. Especially this crop of girls, who looked more like garden variety strippers than dazzling Playboy bunnies. I was surprised with how wrong I thought I was. They were accepting and encouraging, some more than others, and Vicky, one of the more seasoned girlfriends, even offered to take me under her wing as I navigated this new foreign world. It really didn't occur to me that they had their own agenda, which I would soon learn. The girls would rattle on about how glamorous it was being a girlfriend and how every girl that moved into the mansion would eventually become a playmate. They all had a weekly allowance to buy club clothes and get their hair and nails done, and the afternoons free to spend however they like. As a girlfriend, you just needed to be available on the nights when Hef hosted events at the mansion, went clubbing in Hollywood, attended red carpet parties, etc. This may sound naive, but I didn't immediately realize that they were actually required to sleep with Hef. Okay, to be honest, I didn't think they were either. Back in the day when I saw him with all those girls, I thought it was just all for publicity. I didn't think that anything was going on behind closed doors because I am also naive as well. Back then, none of the girlfriends talked about it. And you'll see why here soon. When I inquired about the more intimate duties, Vicky fiercely denied that anything sexual went on with Hef. It's all for show, Vicky said, explaining that the whole thing was basically a Hef-orchestrated publicity stunt. The girlfriends were simply dazzling arm candy to help keep up his Playboy image. It sounded more like a job than an actual relationship, and they sold it to me so matter-of-factly. I was able to overlook what this job really sounded like. Hef's former girlfriend, Katie Lohman, let's see if I can find a picture. There she is, there's Katie. Katie had left recently, and Vicky told me that when she went on Howard Stern after scoring her centerfold and cheerfully denied that any of the girls slept with Hef with a dismissive laugh, she was promptly kicked out of the mansion. Years later, I found a taped copy of the interview in Hef's press collection with a skull drawn on the label. He must have really hated that one. I would be lying if I said I still didn't have dreams of one day scoring a pictorial in Playboy's iconic pages, and mansion parties were a fun way to spend the weekend, but my main focus was either pursuing an acting career or going back to school. I didn't have time to be Hugh Hefner's on-call trophy girlfriend 7 days a week, nor did I really think I had what it took. When I first started coming around, Hef was dating the Bentley twins. Those two sophisticated glamazons that seemed to pay homage to the glory days of Playboy with the right hair and makeup. I considered myself a pretty girl, but Mandy and Sandy looked like movie stars. After they departed the mansion, the sloppy seven invaded and lowered the bar. It's almost unsettling how quickly your priorities can shift. Over the past year, I had been working long hours to afford my rent, and I'd been auditioning like crazy. Luckily, I had no trouble getting an agent and even managed to land a few bit parts here and there. They didn't pay much, and it was enough to encourage me to continue pursuing my dream. My two closest friends hadn't been as fortunate. Heather had given up and decided she was moving back to Pittsburgh. My roommate Nora hadn't landed a single thing either. The lease on our apartment was ending, and she told me that her parents had agreed to pay her rent on a new lease, but only if she had her brother, an alcoholic who needed constant babysitting, move in. Just like that, I had to go. It was like that scene in Bridesmaids where Kristen Wiig gets... Oh my gosh, it is. where Kristen Wiig gets booted from her apartment by Rebel Wilson and her on-screen brother. Only not funny. Nora knew I had no credit and was broke as a joke. I couldn't believe she was doing this to me. But as hopeless as the situation seemed, I refused to go back to Oregon. Not only did I not want to burden my parents, I also knew that leaving now would set back any progress I had made in becoming an actress. The desire to perform is what drove me to Los Angeles, and the thought of returning home miserable and still dreaming of Hollywood killed me. I started to wonder, couldn't Playboy help me reach that goal? I'd seen it before. Baywatch Hawaii executive producer Michael Burke was a mansion regular, and Hef's former girlfriend Brandy Roderick landed a leading role on the show shortly after appearing as a centerfold. For anybody that may not know who Brandy Roderick is, this is her. Sharing a screen with her right now is making me feel quite insecure because, do y'all see me compared to her right now? Let's go back to the book, okay? The more time I spent at the enchanting Holmby Hills compound, the more I started seeing opportunities like these. It's very easy to get transfixed by the magic of this curious world, where even the impossible seemed possible, where a small town girl could rub elbows with movie stars and be made to feel like a fantasy. I had spent so much of my youth searching for that kind of opportunity, and it seemed Playboy could hand it to me on a silver bunny emblazoned platter. One weekend, while waiting outside of the mansion's front door for the valet to pull up my beat-up old car at the end of a Sunday fun day, I looked up at the glowing second-story windows and wondered what it would feel like to call that place home. It looked so cozy and safe. Vicky had once given me a peek inside her room, and I was surprised at how much it looked like the type of room I would have liked to have. The plush bed was covered in pink candy-striped satin sheets and piled high with Playboy-branded clothing, free gifts for Hef's girlfriends. Disney paraphernalia was everywhere from a recent shopping spree at Disneyland, all on Hef's tab, of course, and a dreamy window seat overlooked the backyard. We even ordered cheeseburgers from the kitchen, which may not sound like much, but it was. Once upon a time, Hef's guests could order whatever they wanted from the kitchen, whenever they wanted. It was even said that Jack Nicholson used to treat the mansion as a drive-thru back in the 70s. He would call the butler's pantry ahead of time, order a meal, and have it brought out to his car as he drove up the driveway. After the food was delivered to him in a paper sack, he would supposedly speed out the back gate without so much as a hello. Since then, guests' access to the kitchen became a little more limited, but Hef's girlfriends could still order whatever they wanted 24 hours a day. To me, someone used to scraping together pennies in order to eat at Burger King, this was on another level. I had to admit, the whole girlfriend thing was starting to look pretty appealing. Around that time, a few of the girls had suggested that I come out with them for one of the bi-weekly club nights. One of the girlfriends, Kimberly, had recently been kicked out, which meant that there was an open spot Hef was ready to fill. Talk to Hef, Vicky encouraged after I confided in her about my housing problem. Never did it occur to me to simply approach him myself. It also never occurred to me that the then 7 girlfriends wanted me around only because my ordinary appearance was non-threatening. They wanted to make sure whoever filled the empty space wasn't competition. On Sunday, I worked up the nerve to mention the idea to Hef when he finally appeared poolside. "I'd love to come along with you the next time you all go out," I said, bracing myself for a less than exuberant response. Much to my surprise, he immediately took to the idea and invited me to join them that coming Wednesday. "Awesome!" I cheered with a little hop. "Thank you." Hef seemed amused by my childlike excitement, but quickly turned back to his friends. When I found Vicky to share the good news, she filled me in on all the details. I was to meet Hef and the girls at 10 p.m. in the mansion's main entry hall, dressed to impress in my sexiest club wear before heading to Las Palmas. I think that's how you say it. Las Palmas. Hollywood's hottest nightclub. Every girl at some point has uttered the phrase, "I have nothing to wear," but in my case it was sort of true. I spent the next 3 days staring at the approximately 10 items of clothing hanging in my closet, wishing that something appropriate would magically appear. I figured that if Hef approved of how I looked, maybe he would consider offering me a role as a girlfriend. It felt like a long shot, but there was always a chance, and my alternate options were becoming more and more grim. I would not be going back to Oregon. I just couldn't. Still, I was too embarrassed to ask any of my friends to borrow anything. Probably because doing so meant I would have to field questions I wasn't prepared to answer. Picking up where we last left off, with Holly getting ready to join Hef and the girlfriends for the very first time on the night out. Eventually, I decided to pair a black miniskirt, which, despite its name, was about 3 inches longer than any of the girlfriends wore, and a baby blue top with metal mesh overlay that tied in the back. She was very of the times. I can picture this outfit right now in my head. After analyzing my every angle in the bathroom mirror, I took a deep breath, jumped in my car, and made the 10-minute drive to Hugh Hefner's place. I pulled into the driveway at 9:55 p.m., petrified that I would be the last to arrive. I've always been a stickler for punctuality. I quickly discovered that was a rarity at the mansion. I waited in the entrance hall for more than 10 minutes before any of the ladies made their way down the cascading Old English staircase. There was another girl waiting downstairs named Candace, who appeared to be auditioning for the open girlfriend spot as well. She was quick to tell me that she had already been out with the group the previous Friday, and also how fond Hef was of her. Oh shit, I thought. Maybe I was a day late and $1 short. Candace might get offered the empty girlfriend spot before me. In passing, the mansion looks decadent. But when taking the time to truly look at some of the nooks and crannies, it's amazing how neglected it was. I would come to refer to the decor as 70s corn chic. At the time, there were 9 dogs living in the mansion, most of them named after fashion designers or luxury car brands, naturally. And the ancient yellow carpeting on the grand staircase was covered in urine stains. I remember thinking that the carpet must have been older than any of his girlfriends. Whew, ain't that the truth? That being said, at the time, it was by far the nicest home I'd ever stepped inside. Finally, the girlfriends emerged in ascending order, newest to the oldest. At that particular time, the cast of characters was a motley crew of bottle blondes, a quiet girl named Carolyn, upcoming playmates Adriana and Lisa, Vicky and Tina Jordan, Hef's main girlfriend. The scene was almost comical as each girl bounced down the Gone with the Wind-esque staircase, like a carbon copy of the girl before her. Whitish blonde hair and large barrel curls, the skimpiest sparkly dress imaginable, and the kind of strappy platform heels you'd expect to see on stage at a script club. I would have thought Hugh Hefner preferred his girlfriend sexy and retro, but his taste was surprisingly, well, cheap. As for Tina and Hef, they would never arrive until everyone was already in place, like some antiquated nod to the hierarchy that existed. For anyone who doesn't know who Tina is and likes to put a face to the name, this is Tina Jordan. We'll leave her up there for a little minute. One of the butlers arranged us in the hall and snapped a few pictures for Hef's scrapbook before we piled into the limousine. Another Playboy tradition to satisfy Hef's endless desire for mementos. The next morning prints would be placed outside each girl's bedroom, which only amplified the massive pressure to always look perfect and caused the girlfriends to spend hours critiquing their appearances. Excuse me. When we finally arrived in Hollywood, the scene outside of the nightclub was absolute chaos. Hundreds of men in Von Dutch trucker hats and women in their obligatory low-rise Frankie B jeans and fedoras, because in 2001, every club girl was just dying to be mistaken for Britney Spears. Were bombarding the entryway, clamoring over one another to get the attention of the resident doorman stationed behind the red velvet rope. Oof. From the looks of it, you would have thought Oprah was inside giving away free cars. As the limo door opened, 4 security guards rushed to part the sea of club goers so we could make our way inside. I had been to nightclubs before, but I was usually one of those unlucky souls not on the list and relegated to the mile-long line that wrapped around the block. I was one of the first to step out of the limo, and every set of eyes turned to check if I was someone worth knowing. I started fussing with my top, unnerved by this unexpected attention. One by one, each bottle blonde piled out of the limousine, waiting for Hef before we made our way inside. Vicky must have noticed the astonishment in my eyes, because she leaned over and whispered, "NSYNC and Christina Aguilera were here the last time we came." When Hef finally emerged from the car, the crowd went wild. People were shouting his name and shoving one another to get a better look. He lifted a hand to wave to the crowd as if he were some kind of dignitary. The whole thing seemed incredibly strange to me, but for Hef, it had become a regular part of his weekly routine on the LA club scene. For decades, Hef was an infamous homebody. After all, he created his own version of paradise at the Playboy Mansion, so why would he ever want to leave? Throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was extremely rare to see him out and about. In 1999, when he separated from his wife of almost 10 years, Kimberly Conrad, a few of his friends persuaded him to leave his compound for a night on the town. What happened next was a surprise to everyone. People went absolutely crazy to see the 70-something icon from another era at an LA nightclub. Shortly thereafter, Hef instituted his bi-weekly club nights. Rolling Stone magazine called it Hugh Hefner's resurrection. I would later learn that this sort of behavior wasn't atypical. The only thing Hef loved more than the mansion was himself. The sort of super fandom he saw at these nightclubs was all the fuel this senior citizen needed to keep painting the town red. It was during one such evening after his separation that Hef met Sandy and Mandy Bentley. Immediately, he began dating these two blonde bombshells, along with another blonde, Brandy Roderick. This unusual foursome made Hef even more of a sensation. The age difference, the number of girlfriends, the hint of incest, the fact that all three of the girls' names rhymed. I didn't even realize that. Sandy, Mandy, and Brandy. That means chef's kiss. The odds could not have worked out better in his favor than what they had. Along with Hef's constant public insistence that he had to take Viagra to keep up with all of these women made the situation truly bizarre. In Los Angeles, the bizarre is often appreciated, if only momentarily, and at that moment in time, Hef and his blonde entourage had become adored mascots for the LA nightclub world. As soon as we entered past the velvet ropes, we were whisked away to a private area next to the dance floor. Hef settled into the plush booth flanked by Tina and Lisa. Our VIP table was already stocked with an array of alcohol and mixers. This was the golden age of bottle service, and Hef indulged in every luxury. Security lined the velvet rope separating our table from the rest of the crowd. If a guy was brazen enough to try to get the attention of one of the girlfriends, security would block them from our table and occasionally escort them outside, depending on how persistent he was. Since most nights the girls were locked up in the mansion like some twisted version of Rapunzel, they used these evenings out as opportunities to meet other men. Yes, most of Hugh Hefner's girlfriends had other boyfriends. In fact, during my time at the mansion, I can only say for sure that two of us remained faithful. My future BFF, Bridget Marquardt, and myself. Needless to say, this was all very hush-hush because Hef strictly forbade any of his girlfriends from dating other people. While Hef could date an entire sorority house full of girls, we were to remain totally loyal. Looking back, I'm pretty sure that rule existed not so much because Hef was jealous of other men, but because the truth would have burst the public persona he had spent decades crafting. Girls who were caught cheating on Hef would be thrown out of the house immediately. While the girls took that rule extremely seriously, it didn't mean they would actually obey it. So on these club nights, the girls would often dip off to the ladies' room and head to a corner of the bar hidden from Hef's view, making friends and exchanging numbers with men, like normal 20-something girls should be doing. I stayed close to Vicky most of that night and followed her lead, dancing, drinking, and making sure to pay lots of attention to Hef. At one point, when he stood up to dance with us, his rhythm was so off that I was certain he was joking, and let out a big laugh. Vicky shot me a look that made it very clear he was not joking. Luckily, he didn't register my laugh as mocking and continued dancing. Oh my God, I thought, genuinely mortified for him. Had no one told him how silly he looked? He pulled out some truly ancient dance moves that I can't imagine were remotely cool in any era other than the 70s. I felt a bit sorry for him dancing around like the punchline to a bad joke. Did they always allow him to look so foolish? I wondered why these women, his 7 dingbats, didn't care enough to protect him from the embarrassment. Surely they owed him at least that. And worse yet, they encouraged his awkward dancing about. Back then, he seemed like such a sweet man to me, and this felt unnecessarily cruel. Regardless, I knew it wasn't my place to break the news to him. Not that night, anyway. I was so eager to make a good impression that I could hear my heart in my ears. I was grateful that Hef allowed me to tag along in the first place. He seemed like a good man and talked as if he wanted the world for his girls. But like all that glitters and sparkles, this opportunity wouldn't come without a steep price. Would you like a quaalude? Hef asked, leaning toward me with a bunch of large horse pills in his hands, held together by a crumpled tissue. No thanks, I answered cheerfully, as if I were interviewing for a job. I don't do drugs. Okay, that's good, he said nonchalantly. Usually I don't approve of drugs, but in the 70s, they used to call these pills thigh openers. I laughed nervously, unsure of what to say. I was proud of myself for saying no. It was the right decision. I still felt in control of the situation and was prepared to tackle whatever came my way with sober eyes. Today, I want to scream, "Pause!" and freeze frame that moment of my life back in late August 2001. I want to grab that young girl, shake her back into reality, and scream, "What the hell are you thinking?" Hef was a notoriously lecherous 70-something old man offering me quaaludes that he referred to as thigh openers. Are you kidding me? Why didn't I run for the nearest exit? It doesn't get much creepier than that. But I suppose I had already made up my mind at that point. Looking back, I can't imagine what I was thinking. But I'm also so far removed from what I was feeling back then. I was about to be homeless. I had no place to go and was panicking over what to do next, when this opportunity with Hef just sort of fell into my lap. If I became a girlfriend, I would have somewhere to live. If I became part of Playboy's inner circle, perhaps that could even help my career. It felt as if my stars were starting to align. I decided to take the chance and see what this strange, legendary world was all about. For as long as I could remember, I had been searching for a great adventure, and this was already the craziest night I'd ever experienced. Like watching a bizarre old movie, I was utterly transfixed by this strange universe. Despite my initial intention to keep a clear head, I foolishly proceeded to get really, really drunk without even meaning to. I can't even begin to tell you how much vodka and champagne I consumed, aided by the helpful hands of the other girls who were all too eager to continue plying me with drinks. While I patted myself on the back for turning down the pills, by the time we left the club, I couldn't have been any more incoherent. On the limo ride back to the mansion, Candace leaned over and whispered to me that all of the girls, myself included, were expected to join Hef in his bedroom. She had a small smile on her face as she watched me absorb this news, which I immediately registered as odd, almost as if she relished my shock. For the better part of the year, the girlfriends went out of their way to convince me that no one was actually intimate with Hef. Was Candace just trying to scare me off? I wasn't an idiot. Despite their staunch denials, it was still a widely accepted public theory that Hef slept with all of his girlfriends. But when I asked them about it directly, they were incredibly convincing, acting almost appalled by the idea. This important factor was the touchstone of their entire sales pitch, and the fact that sex would actually be required wasn't exactly something I had prepared myself for, especially for my first night out. But at this point, I felt like it was my only option. Maybe it wasn't that torturous, I thought. Why else would all these pretty young girls be jumping through hoops to be a girlfriend? I could just see what it's all about. If it's bad, I'll leave. Massive viewer discretion right now. Massive. What happened next is all sort of a haze. With roughly a third of a bottle of vodka sloshing around my stomach, I stumbled up the mansion's grand staircase and was ushered by the girls toward Hugh Hefner's bedroom suite. Tina brought me into the back door of the bedroom, which led into the large black and yellow bathroom. All the girlfriends in various stages of undress conglomerated around the large black marble bathtub with their feet dangling in the pool of hot water. I followed Tina's lead, took off my shoes, and dipped my feet in. I have to say, after a full night of dancing in very high heels, the hot water felt amazing. Before I even had a chance to register much of what was going on, the girls quickly got up and hightailed it into the dark, cavernous room beyond. They all hated the bedroom routine and tried to get it over with as quickly as possible. Tina handed me a pink flannel pajama set to wear, which matched the ones all the other girls were grabbing out of Hef's, I don't know why I just said his whole name, out of Hef's massive closet area. Yes, Hef's harem wore flannel PJs. How's that for a fantasy? As Tina led me into the bedroom, I stumbled over and weaved through massive piles of junk covering the floor. It appeared that Hef liked to collect more than just women. Ceiling-high piles of videotapes, stuffed animals, art, and gifts littered the room. It was like an episode of Hoarders, but perhaps in his case it would be more appropriately titled Hoarders. Two huge television screens projecting graphic porn lit up the otherwise dark room. In the middle, a very pale man was tending to his own business, if you're catching my thinly veiled innuendo, and puffing on a joint before passing it around to the nearest blonde. The girlfriends, in various stages of undress, were sitting in a semicircle at the edge of the bed, some kneeling, some standing, and some lying down. I sat myself on the edge of the bed, unsure of what to do next. I leaned into Vicky. After all, she was the one I was most comfortable with. Maybe if I hide behind her, I thought, I'll go unnoticed for the night. Fake the fuck, she hissed in my ear and pulled me towards her. I'll explain later. She didn't have to explain. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and I could see that all the girls, backlit by the large screens, were putting on a show. They were going through the motions as if they were getting it on and making out with each other, but no one really was. It was just a big facade. No one was actually in the mood besides Hef, I assumed, or turned on in the slightest. Like the corn itself, it was all just for show. There was loud music blaring, but if you got close enough to any of the girls, you could hear them gossiping with one another or making fun of what was going on in front of them. If smartphones had been around then, I'm pretty sure they would have been texting or checking their Instagram when Hef wasn't looking. When I think about it now, it's almost comical. Every red-blooded American male has no doubt fantasized about what went on in Hugh Hefner's bedroom with his harem of blonde bombshells. The answer? Not a whole lot. Looking back, I don't know if Hef believed the charade. Truthfully, I don't think he cared one way or the other. Whether it was real or fake, he would be satisfied in knowing that the only reason it was happening at all was for his own personal pleasure. The girlfriends and Vicky, it seemed to me in particular, were desperate to bring as many new girls up into the bedroom as possible. With more fresh meat available for Hef, it was less likely that they'd be called on to have sex with their boyfriend as often. Hef could keep up with only so many girls in a night, so as I saw it, Vicky had quickly figured out that recruiting new girls effectively achieved two goals at once. Not only would she most likely avoid having to have sex with Hef, But she'd also earn his favor by bringing around pretty new young things for his enjoyment. Of course, at the time, I knew none of this. Despite the bimbo label often placed on Hef's harem, some of the girls were quite savvy. Girlfriend politics was serious business, ruthless, calculated, and complex. On that particular night, Candace and I were the newest victims, and it definitely felt to me that our new friend pushed us into the action. Hef, don't you want to be with the new girl? Vicky screamed over the loud music as she reached over and pushed him towards me. Much to my surprise, my turn was over just as quickly as it started. By the time I was able to wrap my head around what was happening, Hef had already moved on to Candace, then to a few of his actual girlfriends before finishing off by himself as he always did. I have never had a more disconnected experience. There was zero intimacy involved, no kissing, nothing. It was so brief that I can't even recall what it felt like, beyond having a heavy body on top of mine. Even though it was just a few short minutes of my life, I had never taken intimate experiences lightly, so it weighed heavily on me. I was disappointed in myself that it had come to this. Even in my drunken haze, I knew that it was a big decision I would have to live with. Some of the girls leaned over and quickly pecked Hef on the cheek, in the same unattached manner that most would probably kiss their grandfather. The girls began filing out of the room, offering Hef a few candy-coated good nights. Quickly, I pulled on my pajamas and followed Vicky down the hall and into her bedroom. I was so wasted that I forgot to grab my club clothes and purse, which were strewn about somewhere on the floor of the master suite. Vicky ordered cheeseburgers and fries to the room as if it were any other night, but I passed out before the food even arrived. Over the years, I would see so many girls come and go through that cavernous master bedroom. I never encouraged anyone to come up there, and was often downright cold to some of the girls Hef would invite out with us. It wasn't because I felt threatened, or even due to my own embarrassment, but mostly because I didn't want to do to those other girls what Vicky had done to me. I had hoped my hard exterior would dissuade them from making my same mistakes. Vicky had tried to act all buddy-buddy, like we were just friends having fun together. Like she wanted me to be a part of her club. But I had been used, plain and simple. Unfortunately, it took me a while to realize that. At the time, I wanted to believe that Vicky actually liked me and only pushed Hef towards me because she wanted me to become a girlfriend. Like I said in the beginning, I was naive. The following morning, I woke up feeling terrible, and it wasn't just the hangover. Vicky escorted me back to the master bedroom to help me look for my clothes and purse, and just as if it were any other morning, she gave me a friendly hug goodbye. But I couldn't just leave. I had to find Hef. After asking one of the butlers where he might be, I finally found him in the library busying himself with notes for the Friday night's mansion movie screening. Before each movie, he always prepared a sort of speech. Hef, can I bother you for a second? I squeaked, my voice breaking mid-sentence. I would quickly adopt this as my go-to pitch when speaking with Hef. The higher octave made it easier for him to hear out of his one good ear. Without even looking up from the pages, he gestured with one hand that I enter his lair. In light of the evening prior, I was even more nervous in his presence than usual. Hef was so used to girls coming in to ask for favors, though, that he didn't seem at all surprised by my impromptu interruption. I had gone from hoping to move into the mansion to downright determined. There was no way I was not going to get what I wanted after having to sleep with him the night before, or rather, earlier that morning. In the years that would follow, I noticed that after being intimate with Hef, the new girls fell into one of three categories: the hustler, the runner, or the fighter. Most of the girls that ended up becoming girlfriends reacted the same way. They were very nonchalant about their initiation. Before the sun even rose the following morning, these hustlers were already calculating just how many pennies they could squeeze out of the arrangement. Next, we had the runners. While the hustlers were scheming, the runners were fleeing. Like a hit and run, these girls would bolt from the scene, never to be heard from again. While most, if not all, had hoped to land a pictorial, they disappeared off the face of the planet, never returning for another night out or party. Yeah, I'd probably be the runner. You know, like back in my 16, 17, 18-year-old mind of wanting to go there and live that lifestyle, I guarantee you after one night out, I would not be able to hang anymore, and I would be hightailing it right on back home and pretending like I never even tried to do that. You know what? I don't know what you're talking about. I never did that. But seriously, though, I really would be the runner. Like, I'd really go out one night, experience that, and be like, this probably isn't for me. The runners always seemed like inexperienced girls, so I assumed they didn't come back because they didn't like what they had seen or done in Hef's bedroom while under the influence of alcohol, quaaludes, or both. My reaction fell into the third category, the fighters. I was freaked out and frankly ashamed by the experience. After disappointing myself like that, I had to come away with something positive, something to make it right in my mind somehow. I knew that if I couldn't find a silver lining, I couldn't forgive myself for the night before. The other girls who would react as I did were probably the most damaged and affected. We couldn't so easily shrug off what we had been reduced to. It would haunt us, but in order to move forward, we needed to find an upside. For me, asking to move in, therefore, seemed like the next rational step, or so I convinced myself, and I decided to bite the bullet. After all, it hadn't occurred to me to invite myself out to the nightclub until prompted, and I had met a very welcoming response, so I figured I might have the same luck with moving in. I was a young blonde girl with a small waist and large boobs, but I wasn't quite as polished as the girls that usually decorated Playboy's pages and hallways. Still, for the most part, I fit the bill of girlfriend. I can do this, I thought. It might be hard to understand, but in that moment, I didn't blame Hef for anything creepy that had gone on the night before. He had the nice guy act down pat, and it worked. At the time, Hef still had a certain swagger. There was a gentlemanly air about him that belied his reputation, and there was never a shortage of Hef's friends lingering around the mansion who were all too eager to remind every pretty young thing that stepped through the doorway what an amazing, kind man Hugh Hefner is. It was easy to fall under the spell. If anything, it was the other girls I felt used by, and I couldn't let them win. Can I ask you something? I let out another squeak. He looked up at me for the first time, and I flat out told him that I had no place to live. What do you think about me moving in? He took a brief moment to consider what I had just asked before finally saying, you can stay for a while and we'll see how it works out. Chapter 3. It's really dreadful, she muttered to herself. The way all the creatures argue. It's enough to drive one crazy. And that is from Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It only took me one trip in my beat-up red Toyota Celica to move my entire life from a tiny Westwood apartment into Hombley Hills estate. No one offered to move me in, but I didn't really need the help. I didn't have much to bring besides the few outfits I owned, some makeup, my college books, and a handful of childish knickknacks, like Disney princess picture frames and Star Wars figurines. I don't even think I owned a curling iron at the time. I left my single twin mattress next to a dumpster. As I pulled up the iconic driveway on Charing Cross Road, it couldn't have felt less like home. The gates opened for me, and just like that, I was the newest resident of the Playboy Mansion. I pulled my car through the driveway and gave the keys to one of the staffers, who then made a call to one of Hef's secretaries. She directed me to my room and presented me with my room key. Less than an hour later, I had moved my belongings into the bedroom that Hef's secretary designated for me, and that was that. None of the other girls even poked their heads out of their bedrooms, let alone offered to help. I was pointed to my room and left alone. Now what? I thought. It was entirely bizarre. I didn't tell many people about my decision to move into the mansion. I quickly learned that not everyone had the most positive reaction. I had naively thought of myself as an adult who was free to make her own decisions out of high school, away from my small town Oregon, and far from the type of people who would judge me for my personal decisions. I was so wrong. When I told Nora, which is her old roommate that she had, I was moving into the Playboy mansion, her jaw dropped so quickly I thought it would hit the ground. Nora was hyper-materialistic and wasn't expecting me to go from rags to riches faster than her. In my excitement, I also told the first acquaintance I had run into while doing errands. His reaction wasn't what I had expected either. "You hooked up with an old dude?" he cried, his face scrunching up. "Gross!" All I had said was that I was moving in, nothing about being intimate with anyone. I guess not everyone was as naive as I had been. Seeing the angry look that appeared on my face, he quickly switched gears. "So," he said, his voice much friendlier, "can you get me on the list for the parties?" This guy clearly had no shame. Needless to say, I told him no. After my friend's less than supportive reaction, I was too terrified to tell anyone else. I was naive enough to believe that the decisions I made in the relative privacy of that dark cave of a bedroom would remain just that, private. I was by no means prepared for the large scarlet letter that had been branded on my chest. I knew my close friends and family wouldn't approve, but I had already made the decision. Listening to their words of warning and disappointment would only make me feel worse. To be totally honest, I was already ashamed enough, and I wanted to delay any further conversations until I had a better understanding of what my life would be like. Any remaining doubts about my decision vanished when, on an early morning, about a week after I had moved in, Vicky stormed into my room screaming, "We've been bombed! We've been bombed!" It was September 11th, 2001. "New York and the Pentagon," she shrieked. "We've been bombed!" I hobbled into the bathroom feeling sick to my stomach and paralyzed with fear. I imagined the terrorists had bombs aimed at every major city in America. Were we next? In that instant, I couldn't have been more grateful to be inside this great big safe house. Of course, I soon discovered that we hadn't actually been bombed, but the reality was no less scary. Terrorists hijacked 4 American airliners and crashed 2 of them into the World Trade Center towers in Lower Manhattan, as well as 1 into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and 1 in rural Pennsylvania. Thank God I'm here, I thought. I would have been so much more scared had I been out on my own, couch surfing, or worse. The first few nights I slept in bedroom 3, which is this one right here. One of the biggest guest rooms in the mansion with 3 beds and a private bathroom. But like all the other guest rooms in the house, relatively plain. Strangely, it also doubled as a bedroom for Hef's 2 sons, Marston and Cooper, who were 9 and 10 respectively at the time. If they ever were to spend the night in the mansion, though they never stayed over while I was there, there were still toys scattered across the bedroom floor, which made for an incredibly odd and frankly creepy juxtaposition. April was also residing in bedroom 3, and she intimidated the hell out of me. She was taller and bigger boned than Hef's usual type, and had an in-your-face personality. I had heard she used to be a scripper, even though Playboy has a somewhat hypocritical no-scripper policy when it comes to Hef's idea of the wholesome playmate image. She also had a constant need to be the center of attention, and would do whatever she needed to keep the spotlight on her no matter how raunchy. She also made zero effort to hide the fact that she felt I was intruding on her space. That week, another girlfriend, Adriana, announced her departure. It was assumed that April would move into her old bedroom number 5, which is this one right here. And I would be staying in the shared room, which is bedroom number 3. April was new to the mansion herself, but since she had moved in several months before me, still had seniority when it came to rooms. Bedroom 5 was one of the smallest rooms, but it was private. And as I would quickly learn, privacy was key when it came to surviving the mansion mayhem. April, however, had another idea. She asked Hef if she could have bedroom 3 to herself. The mansion was not without its fair share of politics, and when it came to the girlfriends, you had to put in your time and work your way up the totem pole when it came to certain privileges, particularly rooms. New girls who immediately began demanding certain luxuries were seen as pushy or ungrateful. Bedroom 3 was meant to house 3 girls. April scoring it for herself would have been a major coup. Surprisingly, Hef approved her request. I moved out later that day, along with the toys. For months to come, April complained that Marston and Cooper were hostile towards her for taking over their room. I must say, I couldn't really blame them. April taking bedroom 3 meant that I would be moving into bedroom number 5, right here. I couldn't have been more thrilled to be getting the privacy of my own room in my very first week at the mansion. The arrangement wasn't without its downside, though. Bedroom 5 shared a bathroom with Vicky's room. So there's Vicky's room, there's the bathroom in the middle, and then there is bedroom 5. Little did I know that she had a love of laxatives that made sharing a bathroom with thin walls pretty disturbing. It was standard practice for girls to redecorate their rooms when accepting an offer to move in, but I was grateful simply to have a roof over my head. Even if I had wanted to redecorate, I would have been disappointed. Hef's idea of redecorating a girl's room meant replacing the carpet, which he always insisted on being white despite all the dogs constantly relieving themselves everywhere, and having the walls repainted. The girl could choose the color as long as it was one of the chalky matte pastel shades he favored. All of the bedrooms contained mismatched beat-up furniture. Bedroom 5 had an old wooden dresser tucked into one corner, a small TV mounted on the wall, and a bed so large that there wasn't much space left to move around the floor. Faded pink curtains covered the small windows that looked out onto 4 parking spots next to the outdoor kitchen.